I just noted the fact that they made a big splash, whatever, out of the fairly limited Chinese aid. I think President Vučić was still at the airport, and I see they have posters up in Belgrade saying thank you to China, while I haven't seen any corresponding thank you whatsoever for the far more substantial help come from the European Union. And that, I think, has been noted throughout Europe. There's very divergent reactions from the Serbian authorities, and I fail to see the political wisdom of it, I have to say. Serbia is in economic and every other respect part of Europe and part of that sort of network of solidarity. It works and it doesn't work, but it's a far stronger than anything else. But then I see Serbia playing the China card much stronger. What's the political strategy behind that? I don't understand it. I think it's counterproductive from the Serbian point of view. So these are very significant funds of support, far in excess of a couple of more symbolic things that have arrived from other countries. And if the reward for that is just that the president thanks everyone else, is complaining about Europe, then I think long-term the incentive for Europe to give support will decline. If everything that you get from that particular support is criticism from the authorities of Serbia, well, what then?
And how do you see Western Balkan countries' cooperation during the crisis?
Well, I don't see very much of that. I confess I don't follow that in that much detail. But of course, we have a situation where there is concern with the lack of dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. I think initiatives will be taken by the European Union in the next few days to see if we can get that restarted at some point in time. There's now been sort of green light for the accession or start of accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania in the middle of the crisis that we're having. So you have, and the aid package that I mentioned to Serbia is, of course, part of aid packages that goes to all of the countries of the Western Balkans. So there's no question that even in the middle of this crisis, where, as you rightly say, everyone is preoccupied with their own problems, there is substantial attention given to the issues of the Western Balkans.
We could see that China aid also came to Hungary and to other European countries. How do you see that cooperation specifically between Serbia and China or Hungary and China, and cooperation between their political leaders?
I think you can see it's early days, but I think there's a tendency towards a political pattern here. Hungary has been very supportive of China in every single respect. We've seen the Hungarians blocking statements inside the European Union that have been critical of China, the human rights record and things like that, and also on the South China Sea. So Hungary has been acting as a close ally of China within the European Union. And it might be that this is some sort of reward. And to which extent that applies to Serbia, I don't know. But you can see that there is tendencies towards such an element. While in the Swedish case, we have some difficulty with China because of consular issues. They have arrested people and things like that, and that has led to deterioration in the relationship. And that meant that China, instead of helping, has been officially criticizing Sweden. So you see a clear political pattern in the Chinese behavior here. And I think political leaders in Europe should be wise to recognize that.
And how do you see the European answer to Chinese influence?
I think Europe has to be slightly better to sort of give publicity to the aid that it is given, that it is giving. But that, of course, requires the cooperation of the different authorities. I mean, President Vučić was there on the airport receiving the Chinese help. I don't think he was in the vicinity when the aircraft with the European help arrived.
But not just regarding the aid. Is European answer strong enough now in these days of crisis?
We don't know that. The jury is still out. We are still in the beginning of this particular crisis. There is no question that countries like Italy and Spain are extremely hard hit. We now see New York, part of the United States, being even harder hit than Italy and Spain. We see the economic impact being very substantial. We're going to go into significant recession in the European Union and global recession. That's going to hit everyone, Serbia not excluded, sorry to say. And exactly how we're going to respond to this in every single detail, that will be played out over the months, perhaps the years to come.
But when we hear criticism that there's no enough solidarity among European countries, among the world, and that this is just the start, what is your answer?
Well, this is a crisis that's going to play out over a prolonged period of time. We are in the early stages of it, both in terms of the sort of purely medical health response. I think sort of Belgrade is probably in an earlier stage than Sweden, for example, so it will play out significantly over the next few months all over the Western Balkans. In terms of the economic response, even more so. We are starting now to get the first figures on the serious impact on the European economy, and we have an ongoing, fairly lively and not entirely easy debate among the EU countries on exactly what kind of aid programs should be there in order to relieve the different aspects of the European economy. It is by no means easy, and it is by no means a concluded debate.
How do you see Russia's role in the crisis?
I think Russia is fairly busy with trying to manage its own situation. They've done a couple of more PR-oriented things versus Italy. They sent a couple of military medical teams with flags and was received by the Italian foreign minister at the airport and things like that. It turned out that most of that equipment that was sent was not particularly useful. I don't know if they have done anything versus the countries of the Western Balkans or not. But no one has done anything, even in the vicinity of what the European Union has done.
Several years ago, for some other event, you said this is the end of the West as we know it.
Yeah.
Now, is this a start of global changes that will change our perspective to the world, to the West?
In previous crises of this sort, we've always seen the United States exercising an amount of leadership. I mean, go back to the Ebola crisis of 2014, 2015, or prior to that. They were active, they were activating the UN bodies as well. Now the US doesn't seem to care very much about what's happening in the rest of the world and wants to do its own thing, America first, and has even been de facto blocking the UN Security Council from having an effective discussion on it. So it is the first big global crisis of the post-American world.
And do you think that we will deal with the crisis in a good way?
A crisis is always something which is difficult. Nothing is perfect. We are in uncharted waters. We have never ever had to handle a situation with both the sort of medicine, sort of the health aspect, and the profound economic aspect at the same time. And we do it in a time where the global frameworks of cooperation are more fragile than they've been for a very long time, what I call the post-American world. So we'll see. It is a dangerous and difficult period, not only from the sort of individual human point of view, but also from the global stability point of view.
Eyes of the world are wide open, and everyone looks how the world will struggle with the crisis due to coronavirus. Are we paying enough attention to the other things that are happening?
No, we are not. I mean, all of our media, I'm quite certain that applies to Serbia as well, is preoccupied with this particular, the coronavirus crisis. I mean, that's fairly natural. But we have significant issues there. We have the peace process in Afghanistan with all of the difficulties associated with that one. We have Italy. We have a ceasefire that works so far, but we have roughly 1 million people who have been displaced in the last few months. With what that has led to reactions in Turkey, among other places. We have escalation of things and tension in Iraq. And we have quite a number of countries that will be fairly hard hit by the very significant decline in oil prices. If you talk about countries like Nigeria, or going back to Iraq again, they're extremely dependent upon income from their oil export, and that is now going down very significantly. That's going to also have both social and political effects. So there are a lot of things happening out in the world that will affect us apart from the coronavirus, and they all come together and reinforce each other.
And can we deal with those problems?
The bandwidth of, so to say, the bandwidth of governments and political leaders is obviously limited, and most of that bandwidth at the moment is taken up by the corona crisis. That's understandable. But I think you're absolutely right at pointing out the fact that there are quite a number of other issues that also deserve attention.
Along with the fight with coronavirus, the world is also fighting with disinformation about coronavirus. Are we informed well? Are we informed enough? And are there any conspiracy theories that are maybe politically driven?
Well, there's always that, but there's an abundance of reliable information available from the World Health Organization, from the European Center for Disease Control, from the Center for Disease Control in the US. I mean, these are sort of established, very competent global bodies that you can rely on. Then, no doubt, there's an element of a propaganda exercise going on. We've seen that I think the Chinese have been hurt by the fact that it all started with them, and they did significant mistakes in the beginning trying to cover up. And now they are trying to do a sort of a goodwill exercise with sending flights and whatever to different countries in order to make good to a certain extent. That's fine. All help should be welcomed. But there is undoubtedly an element of that going on.
Sweden has a slightly different strategy to fight against coronavirus. And there's also a lot of criticism. Has Sweden done enough to protect its own citizens? What is your opinion about it?
We don't know. I mean, we should be honest when we look at what is happening in the different countries, that no one has a perfect answer to this, and exactly what is going to be the correct approach, that remains to be seen. The two countries which we can say have been doing better than others have been Taiwan and South Korea with their strategies, because they have significantly different figures than we see in the European countries and than we see in the US. So if there is anywhere we should learn, it's from Taiwan and South Korea.
And the last question, can you please tell us how does it look to live in Sweden now, and what are you allowed to and what you can do from your daily activities?
Well, today it's a sunny day, slightly on the cold side, but it's a sunny day, and that helps. Spring is approaching. I don't think that will be stopped by the coronavirus. We are advised to stay at home and work from home as much as we can. Of course, you can go out and get your sort of your food stuff and whatever. If you by necessity have to go to work, you can do that. But there is a strong advice that one should stay at home as much as possible, and that's what we are trying to do.